Welcome to Wolverine Confidential Podcast. I'm Ryan Zook.
And I'm Aaron McMahon.
Big Ten Media Days last week means college football season is right around the corner. MLive was in Las Vegas for the annual event, and we discussed the main takeaways from Sherrone Moore's availability and others. Plus, the Wolverines are in discussions to play overseas for the first time, and a new addition just before camp. All ahead on this episode of Wolverine Confidential. Aaron, good to be with you. And right off the bat here, I have a burning question for you to kick off this pod. What was it like to be in Vegas, having to work and not being able to be at the pool and blackjack tables all day?
It was different. This wasn't the first time I've done it. I remember when I was in college at CMU. You might have been there at the time too. CMU played a game out in Vegas at UNLV. So this isn't the first work trip for football I've taken. It's different. I'm been so accustomed to making, just leisurely trips out there. The fact that I couldn't drink and I actually had to stay on schedule for a day was different. But look, it was a quick in and out trip. Usually I'm there 3-4 nights. This time it was 2 nights, and I was out 6 a.m. Friday morning. So it was a quick in and out. Basically there for media days, nothing else. We had a little fun in, but not much. Just wasn't a lot of time. And it's hot there. It's 110 degrees outside. It was warm. You can't be outside for very long. So it made sense, right? We were inside the Mandalay Bay Convention Center, huge building, huge lot going on there. Different environment as I think we've mentioned this in the pod the last couple of weeks. We're so used to this thing being in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. It was weird going to Las Vegas because it's not really Big Ten country. There's no Big Ten team there. Nonetheless, it was cool. Maybe they'll do it again. I don't know. My understanding is it was a scheduling thing, and that's why they couldn't do it in Indianapolis. They figured, let's go out to Las Vegas and do it. I thought they'd announce something, a Big Ten championship game, or they didn't do it. So either way, it was fun.
Yeah, well, it seems like the biggest overarching storyline entering Big Ten Media Days was a pending resolution to the NCAA's investigation into the sign stealing allegations. And obviously, Sherrone can't speak on it publicly, at least in any detailed manner, until the case is closed. But what did you gather on that front while you were there?
Not much. They're in wait and see mode. Sherrone was asked about it, said he couldn't say much. We know we spoke about this last week, but Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti came out with a letter basically, urging the NCAA to end this thing and issue no more additional penalties. He felt like what the Big Ten did a couple of years ago in suspending Jim Harbaugh for 3 games was enough. We'll see if that makes a difference. But it's clear that the Big Ten, and obviously if you talk to folks from Michigan behind the scenes, they're all ready for this thing to get over with. We're expecting a penalty from the NCAA to come down any day now, certainly before the football season kicks off. So didn't gather a whole lot. Everyone's kind of in wait and see mode just to see, when this thing comes out and what the penalty is going to be, right? Like there's all these people theorizing that it could be the quote unquote hammer and Michigan gets severe penalties. I think if you talk to some Michigan folks, I think they're on the other opposite end. I think they expect some type of deal, certainly for Jim Harbaugh and Connor Stallions and some of the other folks involved. But from a sky is falling perspective, I just they don't see that happening.
Well, at a minimum, Sherrone's going to be suspended 2 games this year, maybe potentially more if the NCAA wants to, like you said, lay down a little bit of a heavier hammer. Did Sherrone mention anything about a contingency plan yet, or is that, still way too early to tell with a month before the opener?
He was asked about it. He said he has a plan. He wasn't ready to tell us what it was, and he actually made a comment like, well, basically saying, we'll see if I even have to use the plan. So he sounds optimistic. He kind of suggested in a way that maybe he may not face a penalty. So we'll see. We know that Michigan suggested or is part of a negotiated resolution 2 games. There have been reports, and I don't know how legitimate they are, that the NCAA maybe wants more games. We'll see where that falls. I tend to believe that Sherrone probably will face some type of suspension. We'll see how many games and what games they are. But no plan that was detailed or laid out to the media. I know we've talked about this before. I mean, Michigan's got several coaches on staff, both on-field assistants and kind of behind-the-scenes staffers who have had coaching experience. So it's not like they'd be without someone who's used to manning the ship on the sideline. So he's got options. My guess is he's thought about several of them. But we'll see. I think once the NCAA penalties come out, and if Sherrone in fact does face a suspension, then we'll hear about it after that.
And it definitely appears to me that like he really wants to coach and be on the sidelines at Oklahoma week 2 to beat coach against his alma mater and against a huge road game against a SEC opponent with with a lot at stake, even being a non-conference game.
Yeah. That's a good assumption to make. He was asked about Oklahoma several times last week in Las Vegas about the about facing Oklahoma where he played. He's graduated from. He's certainly familiar with the school. He said he's looking forward to it. He's asked about some of the the good days there and the attachment maybe he has to the school, and he said he doesn't really think about that much anymore. I mean, he's focused now on the job here in Ann Arbor. He's a Michigan guy now. That's where his allegiance and loyalty lies. And look, yeah, I think selfishly he wants to coach that game. I would too if I was in his shoes. So we'll see where the penalties come down, whether he's going to be on the sideline or not for that game. He certainly wants to. I think Michigan wants him to be. But we'll see where things stand here probably in the next couple of weeks.
And yeah, obviously the a quarterback position taking center stage too this upcoming preseason camp. I mean, it seemed like many were already appointing Bryce Underwood the starter for 2025, but it sounds like that's not set in stone yet, and there's going to be a competition in preseason.
Yeah, if you listen to Sherrone Moore, he made a parent emphasize this that the competition was open. In fact, I asked him during a kind of 45-minute roundtable after he took the podium for Big Ten Network there in Las Vegas about. I didn't ask about that specifically. I asked about Bryce's just taking so many snaps in spring and how that maybe have brought along his development, fast tracked his development. And he started answering the question, but then right away he goes, before anyone asks, I want to tell you guys that the quarterback battle is still open. So he's not ready to shut this just yet. I think he wants Bryce Underwood to earn this thing. And he said that, right? Like Sherrone was asked a question about money and how that factors into his decision with Bryce and expectations and everything else. And the one thing he kept coming back to, and he said this a little bit in the spring too, that he hasn't promised anything to Bryce Underwood. And Bryce Underwood has accepted that. He said he wants to earn the starting job. He wants to work for everything that he gets. And not only is Bryce on board with that, apparently, but his family is as well. So um, Sherrone and the staff seem they seem apparent that they're gung ho on the idea that Bryce has to win the job, and Michigan's I think doing everything they can to bring in competition to push him. As we know, Mikey Keene transferred in during the offseason. He's very experienced. He was very productive at Fresno State, several stops. He's familiar with the OC Chip Lindsey, so I do think that helps his case.
Is he healthy though?
Right, that's the question. My understanding is yes, he's fine. He's going to be ready to go in fall camp. And then Michigan brought in obviously Jake Garcia, who has starting experience as well. Then you've got other options on the the roster with Jane Davis, and, et cetera. So I think Michigan's doing everything it can to surround Bryce Underwood with experience and talent to try and get the best out of him. That if he does end up getting the starting job week 1, that he legitimately earned it. He was the best quarterback in camp, and Sherrone said they're going to do things in camp to try and cause chaos, not only from Bryce, but for the other quarterbacks on the roster to see how they handle it. And I think at that point, they'll probably make a decision. We've talked about it in the past. I do think Bryce has the upper hand here, given the fast track he got in the spring, the fact that Keene didn't practice and was dealing with I think it was a shoulder injury. We'll see where things go. I thought Keene would have had the upper hand going to spring, but now I think Bryce does just based off his the few months he's had in the program. But we'll see. As I said, Sherrone is adamant that this thing is not closed. They're going to let this thing play out in camp, and I suspect in a couple of weeks they'll probably make a decision.
I think maybe my favorite story you wrote from Big Ten Media Days was kind of Derek Moore's comments on the flag planting at Ohio State, and it didn't seem like he appreciated being in a graphic with the word felony underneath it, and just being associated with everything that transpired afterwards. doesn't sound like that there'll be, at least players and Sherrone Moore say there's going to be no more flight planning in the rivalry moving forward. But yeah, what were your takeaways from those comments?
Yeah, Derek Moore's quietly becoming one of the more animated players on the team. Look, he's a quiet dude. We've dealt with him for a couple of years now. Not one of the better interviews, I think, just based not necessarily just an IQ from an IQ standpoint, but just he's a quiet dude, and he talked about that in a session with reporters in Las Vegas. He's kind of reserved. He's an introvert, and he's kind of had to break out of his shell the last couple of years. And I think you're starting to see that bubble out up in the last month or two. I mean, he was captured on video at the Champion Circle golf outing, whipping his belt out, talking about Michigan State. Now he was asked about Ohio State in Las Vegas and how, yes, he congratulated them winning the national championship, but he also said, like, for that to be fully like a real thing, you needed to beat your arch rival, and obviously they couldn't do it. So, he said no issue talking smack to Ohio State. Interestingly enough, with the flag planting thing, whether you can choose to believe him or not, but he said he wasn't trying to plant the flag. He was running across the field with the flag. He got shoved, and I think there were some words exchanged, and obviously emotions are high, and that's when he decided to do it. So in a way, he's saying, "Oh, House it kind of pushed him to do it." Again, you can believe that or not, but that's kind of he was the center of that the flag planning thing. There was no regret expressed. He did it because he felt like that was right for the situation. Yes, he wasn't appreciative of the aftermath and what went down after that, but he also got a chuckle out of it too. He had some pointed comments for Ohio State, pointed comments for the state of Ohio. It's clear to me why Derek has been identified as a leader, especially the defense. Typically, the players that are invited to Big Ten Media Days every year are guys that are going to be voted captain. Makes sense with Max Bredesen. He was a captain last year. Ernest Hausman certainly worked his way up to leader from a leadership standpoint. And then you got Derek Moore, who's been on the team now a while. He's well respected. And he's expected to be, with the more aggressive lineman. So he was probably the more entertaining interview of Big Ten Media Days. Whether those comments come back to bite him later in the year, I guess we'll see. But they're certainly interesting.
Rivalries never stop year round. I tell you, that's good stuff right there. And yeah, I mean, it's obviously there. Three players and Sherrone Moore were all there for Michigan, representing the Wolverines at Big Ten Media Days. What else stood out to you from the availabilities there that you think was noteworthy?
Well, you mentioned Bryce Underwood, and I don't think I don't think enough questions were asked. I mean, every player was getting asked about Underwood, just in terms of his leadership, his maturity coming into the program as a freshman. And it's clear that while Sherrone Moore and the coaching staff want to see how Bryce kind of wins over the locker room, does in those adverse situations, does in that quote unquote chaos. It's clear that, at least from the players we spoke to in Las Vegas, that Bryce has already kind of won over the locker room. He's already garnered the respect of some of the older veterans. And that's a big step, I think, in identifying your starting quarterback, right? Like we saw that a few years back with Cade McNamara. He kind of rose to the top, with JJ McCarthy coming in as a true freshman. Again, he was a 5-star kid, high, allure, like hype was there, but Cade had won the locker room at that point and proven himself in games. So it's, to me, early on, Bryce has the locker room, which is it's a good thing. Now we'll see if he can back that up in fall camp. He by all accounts did pretty well in spring. Obviously, he's got some things to do, and he's still got to get acclimated just to the speed of the game. And again, practice is different than the games, but so far so good with him. And he was a talking point nonstop. I mean, he was someone that everyone was getting asked about. Everyone wants to know about Bryce Underwood, what he's like, how he's acclimating. And there's little to critique at this point. It sounds like the players have enjoyed their time with him so far. And the one thing too, typically when there's a quarterback battle, players like to push back. If one player's getting asked about a lot, like in this case, Bryce Underwood, all the questions about Bryce, and very few were about Mikey Keene or Jane Davis, typically they push back on that stuff and say, well, yes, he's great, but so is this guy and this guy. It wasn't a lot of that. It was a lot of focus on Bryce Underwood. I think they probably understood that going in, yet they still talk glowingly about him. So I think that speaks good for Bryce's stature, not only in the locker room, but his case for being a starting quarterback week one in next month.
All right, let's pivot to a different topic here, and a little bit of a surprising one. I guess I didn't have this on my bingo card for the offseason, but looks like Michigan is in ongoing discussions to potentially kick off the 2026 season in Germany against Western Michigan, which would be a first time in program history that Michigan plays outside of the U.S. And I don't. Yeah, just curious to get what your thoughts are on this, Aaron. I mean, to me, I'm just yeah, I don't really see the point. Like, I mean, maybe if you're playing a team from like an out of state team, like a mid major team from out of state or something, but like to play an in state team in Germany, just I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my eyes.
Yeah, you're I think you're not alone. I mean, it seems like the general reaction from the fan base, at least on social media, from the announcement, it was quite a lot of like head scratching. You're giving up effectively a home game to go play overseas, and look, it's cool. We're starting to see more of it in college football. If you week zero, Iowa State I think is playing Kansas State in Dublin, Ireland. So you're starting to see more international games, and while it's fun, if you're a dedicated season ticket holder, Michigan donor, fan, whatever that we're planning to go to that game or wanting to go to a game like that, it makes it a lot more difficult, a lot more expensive. So it's important to point out that this game was already set for the calendar. Michigan was already supposed to open the 2026 season against Western Michigan just to be in Ann Arbor. So they're moving this game. The plan is, and again, this isn't finalized yet. It came out from a report from On3. Michigan felt the need to respond with a press release, basically saying they're in advanced discussions to do so. Nothing's been set just yet, but that they laid out the parameters here. It would move from week one to basically week zero. They play in Frankfurt, Germany, at Deutsche Bank Park, home of the Bundesliga soccer team there. So it'd be unique situation. Look, Michigan's not immune to situations such as these. I mean, Jim Harbaugh took the team overseas several times in the offseason for practices and just team events and everything else. So they are in a way used to going overseas, but not for a game. So that's the difference here. So we'll see where things go. My understanding is one of the things keeping this from being finalized, quote unquote, is just the money perspective. I think they're still trying to get the funding together for this thing. I asked someone behind the scenes about this, what's keeping it from the finish line, and the person replied to me jokingly, "Your donation." So they're clearly trying to get money for this, and that's the one thing that I'm curious about, right? Because with revenue sharing being a big deal, Michigan's made a big deal the last 6 months or so about the need to bring in more revenue from events and everything else to help pay out some of these bigger bills that are coming due. Michigan makes a lot of money from home games. They want home football games. So the fact that they're willing and looking to move this game overseas is interesting to me. Where's the money coming in? How much are they on the bill hook for? My expectation is that Western Michigan's going to get a sizable chunk of money because they're due to be paid $1.5 million out of this game. So it's the financial piece that I think they're still trying to figure out. But yeah, it sounds like it's going to happen. I'm, interesting, curious. In our case, I'm happy to go over there. It'd be a fun trip, and I'm sure the players would love it as well. But yeah, it's an interesting move.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it right there too. It's all about the money, and it's like, and in an age where Michigan is athletic director Ward Manuel is literally discussed trying to find new revenue streams to stay afloat in this new NIL and revenue sharing era, and to potentially play a game overseas where you're giving up a home game that brings in millions. It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And yeah, if you're relying on, I mean, there people are relying, or the programs relying on donations to help fund NIL ventures too. So it's like, if I'm a donor, do I want to spend money to try and help provide NIL opportunities for the student athletes and for them to go overseas when I, let's say I'm a donor, I like to go like my home games and have season tickets, and you're taking that away from me too. And maybe they would like to go on a trip overseas too to Germany, but I don't know. It just seems a little bit perplexing to me. I can see Michigan agreeing to that if it was someone else's home game and like they don't sell out every game of 100,000 people, like that would make sense to me. But in this case, I'm really struggling to see how this makes a whole lot of sense. And like you said, it does seem like the fan, not all fans are on board with this, and some are pretty disappointed. So we'll see what happens. 2026 season opener is still a long way away, but yeah, definitely interesting to say the least.
Yeah, and I think if they do in fact move it, where it's going to hurt the most is the casual fans, right? The fans with families, the Michigan fans who maybe don't go to every game, who buy individual tickets, and look in those situations, their best chance of seeing Michigan football live is some of those non-conference early season games where tickets are just less expensive, much easier to obtain, it's an easier way of going about things. When you take the show on the road, so to speak, and take it overseas, you're basically taking the opportunities away from those people who don't go to every Michigan football game, maybe can't afford it, can't you don't have the ability, that family, whatever. So this is going to benefit a smaller pool of people. The stadium they're going to play in is only a 55,000 seat deal. So it would be I think the more expensive donors would be able to go. They'd probably be willing to go. But the casuals or some of the season ticket holders that just can't afford to travel over there, they're gonna lose out in the game, and I could see why they're disappointed.
All right, one final thing here before we wrap up today. Michigan seems to have added one another player to the roster